All right, guys. Good morning, afternoon, depending on when you're listening. This is the final presentation, the proposed study. My study is on the level of elopement across different settings. So I hope you enjoy it. So, why did I choose elopement? If you've taught any amount of time, you've had a kid that had just had enough. They got up and just walked out. No rhyme, no reason, just gone. And you ask yourself, especially first, second year teachers, what do I do in this situation? And it can cause mass panic. Um, it can be dangerous or fatal for any student, no matter the disability. Some possible effects from elopement: it can disrupt the class and instruction. Um, it can cause the entire school to go on a lockdown. Most schools have a procedure for runners. I know at the schools that I've worked at in the past, we would do runner drills where they actually come over the intercom, say there's a runner headed down so and so hallway, and each teacher would have to stop instruction, step out of their door, and watch for the student coming down the hall. Office staff, whoever was in the building at that time, would have to go to a specific area and wait for the child. So that interrupts the entire school, from the teachers to the front office workers, everybody. Poses obvious dangers for the student, but also for the adult. That child's running across the highway. You're not going to just let him go across. You're going to have to go after him. The dangers grow exponentially when you go into a public setting. Um, Child runs away from mom, dad, whoever at Walmart shopping. Now they're gone for real. There's nobody standing at the doors watching for him, or there's no runner drills in public. He or she risks becoming lost or kidnapped, and puts him or herself in a possibly deadly situation. So elopement is a very tricky behavior, and it's very important that it be dealt with. Just a couple of past studies that I found, um, speaking on elopement, and also the intervention that I'll be using for this proposal. One study stated, and this is a quote: nearly half of children with ASD, autism spectrum disorder, were reported to engage in elopement behavior. Now, that's just students with ASD, and nearly half of those. So think about how many that is. If you've worked in any school, you've dealt with children that are on the spectrum, and nearly half of those elope. That's not counting emotionally disturbed. That's not just a student that's got a lot going on at home. That's strictly ASD. So that's already a huge population of students that demonstrate elopement. So it's not just a few kids. This is a significant population. And so that study focused more on the elopement behavior. And then another study I looked at actually focused on the requesting of breaks, not specifically on elopement, but with the similar populations. And the study found that participants that used the intervention of breaks were able to utilize the breaks and increase on-task behavior. So in theory, my thinking would be, if we can increase on-task behavior, you should show a decrease in elopement. In other words, if the student is more relaxed and is more willing to work or do whatever task is in front of him or her, you should not see that student trying to elope or escape from whatever it is that they have to do. Of course, that's all in theory. So the purpose. Due to the fact that a child with a disability eloping from an assigned area can be potentially life-threatening, like we discussed, This study is going to be to determine if a brake system would decrease that level of elopement. Uh, a more specific research question for this study would be, is there a functional relationship between the implementation of a brake system and the decrease in level of elopement from assigned area or person across multiple settings? So again, it's not just the classroom. This is also if we're out in public running away from mom or running away from dad, whoever it may be. So we're looking across a span of places, not specifically a classroom. So who we're going to use for this study? Uh, the students will be selected and they must meet certain criteria. Uh, I would like to choose them between the age of 7 and 13. A minimum of 2 hours in the general education setting per day. So these will not be your severe profound children that are self-contained nearly all of the day in a CDC classroom or something along those lines. These are children that are going out into everyday settings with at least some independence. They're going to Walmart. They're not being pushed in the buggy. They're walking beside mom or dad. They're going in the line with the other students. They're sitting at a desk. They will either have an IEP or an FBA with a goal that is related to elopement. Now that can look like several things. It can literally say child will not elope from area, so on and so forth. Child will stay in assigned area. Child will not leave without permission. Anything like that that's related to elopement in a current IEP or an FBA. And they have to demonstrate high levels of elopement. This isn't for a student that he eloped once in third grade or once a month he gets up from his desk and walks out. No, this is, and we've all seen it, the child that almost every time you put something in front of them to do or to go somewhere that they don't want to go, they're trying to take off running. Whether that be at home, school, or in public, they need to have high levels in at least one of those settings. And we'll get in more to the settings here in just a little bit, or right now. The proposed study will take place in three different settings: one, public places, home, and school. Public is anywhere not deemed as home or school, obviously, but that be Walmart, church, the park, wherever. A stipulation on this study would be that it has to be with someone who has been trained in the intervention. So, for example, if little Johnny has gone to the park with grandma and grandma has not been trained on the intervention, obviously this isn't going to work. That doesn't count as being out in a public place as far as data collection will be concerned. And you have to be somewhere that you are able to relieve the child by giving a break. So when I think of that, I think, we're at the doctor or something along those lines, and he's in the middle of getting a treatment or breathing treatment, an IV, whatever. You can't give the child a break. Obviously, he or she does not want to be in that situation. They will try to elope, but we can't stop whatever we're doing, no matter if they want to or not. So it has to be in a situation where the child indicates, I need a break from this. And we have to be able to let them go or have that break. The second setting is home. This is multiple rooms normally associated with living, whether that be a bedroom, living room, kitchen, wherever, where the child resides daily. So again, this isn't at grandma's house or granddad's house or best friends, cousins. This is where the child lays down to sleep on a daily basis. This one possibly could be the most important. I have had students in the past elope from home and not be found for a couple days, and that's incredibly scary and definitely life threatening. And so I think it's important that we find interventions that not only work, at public places and at school, but also at home. Because at the end of the day, that's the most important. That's where they're spending most of their time is at home. So it definitely is important that we find interventions that work across multiple settings. And then lastly would be the school. Um, Classroom is approximately 20 by 20 feet. That's your average classroom. Some things that would be in the classroom would be desks, two tables, chairs, teacher desks. This is all hypothetical, of course. Some people that would be present would be the teacher, the interventionist, and students. Unfortunately, 20 to 30 is the average size these days. And so those are the three settings that we'll be using in this mock study. Some more things about the setting. Elopement in public, how it's typically handled is the adult will chase the student that is eloping. They will return them, and usually they'll verbally reprimand them, telling them no running or you have to stay with me, things along those lines. In a home setting, if it is noticed, the child again will be chased and returned and reprimanded. But if not, authorities are oftentimes notified and the search begins for the child. Again, that's a scary situation, and that is definitely what we're trying to address here, is never having to go through that for the child or the parents. In a class setting, the teacher typically makes a runner call. The exits are blocked by teachers and staff, and a follower, we called it a trailer at some of the schools that I worked at, ignores the behavior and returns the child. Now, ignores is used usually. The job of that follower is to make sure that the child is not harming his or herself. Um, with elopement, it is virtually impossible not to give some form of attention to the behavior. So, as long as that student is not harming his or herself, the follower basically just tries to corral them back towards their designated area without trying to intervene too much or restrain or things along those lines. All adults in these settings will be trained by the interventionist in how to implement the brake system. So a little bit about the design of this study. The design will be a multiple baseline across settings like we've discussed. Again, it's across three settings. Um, Intervention will be implemented to the next setting after 4 consecutive sessions of lower levels of elopement in the setting before. So basically, we'll start in the classroom. We will run our baseline data. Once we implement the intervention after 4 sessions of that student showing lower levels of elopement, we will then move to our next setting. Keep in mind that while all that is happening, we're still collecting data from home, we're still collecting data in public, and the intervention will continue across all settings once implemented. That sounds like a lot. It can be done because the parents will also be trained. There will be sessions when the interventionist will be at the house or out at Walmart or grocery store with the student. And again, if it's a student that shows a lot of elopement in a day, then this data shouldn't be that hard to collect, because elopement is obvious. When you see it happen, it's happening. It's easy to document. There's not much discrepancy between collectors. Even parents, they know when he runs, she runs. That's elopement. The design will reveal a functional relation when a significant decrease of level of elopement is demonstrated. So dependent variables, again, that's elopement. And we defined it as leaving an assigned area without permission in efforts to avoid task giving. So that could be anything. The task could be, for example, in public, you're going to walk into the store with dad. The kid does not like that, takes off running. In the classroom, we all know what that looks like. You put the assignment down in front of the student decides, no way, takes off for the door. At home, this could be a whole bunch of different things. This could be, it's time to get in the shower. Dad turns his back to go get a towel. Johnny's gone. But it can also be, I've seen it, it's bedtime. Windows in little Johnny's bedroom, and he doesn't want to go to bed. He's avoiding going to bed. And so he will open that window and just take off. And if mom and dad are asleep, they're not going to know until the next morning. So again, that's why this is so important. Independent variables or variable, I'm sorry. The use of a brake system. The system would consist of red index cards that are 6 by 6 inches that the student would show to the trained adult, indicating that he or she needs a brake. So we're sitting in class. The student does not want to do the assignment. He or she's trying to avoid it. Raises the red card. The teacher sees the red card. Then we move into the actual break. So that will be set up in the classroom, at home, or in public. That could be just, okay, you're not ready to do this, or you're ready to go. Let's go take a walk. Let's get out of this area and go see if we can't calm down. Just as long as the student sees that you understand he or she is frustrated, that they need a break, and that the break is given. Training of teachers or adults will be satisfied when a break is given correctly over 3 consecutive sessions. So that's how we'll know when teachers, parents, whoever we're training will be ready to collect data and implement these interventions, is when they can do it correctly over 3 consecutive sessions. Some procedures. Baseline data will be gathered in each setting. Baseline sessions will treat elopement as usual, as we talked about before. That's the verbal reprimand, the chasing, the returning to the seat, to the house, to the wherever it may be. Intervention will not be introduced until 4 consecutive sessions of lower level of elopement. So again, once we see 4 data points that are lower than that of what was baseline data, then we'll move on to the next setting and the next intervention session. All the while, baseline is being collected in the next setting, and intervention will continue in the previous. If elopement does not show lower levels in a particular setting, the IV will be implemented in the next setting after 5 consecutive sessions of higher levels. So in other words, if the intervention fails in a particular setting, will terminate it and move on after 5 sessions of seeing that high level continue. Some things on inter-observer agreement. Uh, it will be scored using direct observation of the student in 1 hour sessions. Again, if this is a student that's showing very high levels, almost everything we do, he or she is trying to take off running, you should be able to get some pretty good data. The classroom, teacher, parent, and observer will simultaneously collect data on the student until they reach a 90% agreement. Again, that shouldn't be too hard with elopement because it's pretty cut and dry what that looks like. Um, the child leaves the area, that's elopement. Data will be collected for at least 20% of the baseline sessions, and scored interval IOA will be taken, which is the total number of scored agreements divided by the total number of agreements where either observer observed the behavior, multiplying it by 100 to get a percent. So again, this should not vary very much between observers. 100% should be reached, even if it is the parents collecting the data and the interventionist. There shouldn't be very much difference between the two. Fidelity. A second observer will collect data. He or she will use baseline checklists to make sure that we are correctly recording elopement, that we're not counting things like he went to the bathroom. That's not necessarily task avoidance. That's a whole separate issue. Intervention checklist will also be assessed to make sure that the intervention is being used correctly. So just kind of a fidelity check on student requests a break. We're not telling him or her, okay, wait 5 minutes or wait 10 minutes. Let's finish this first. No, we're student requests a break. The break is given immediately. Other staff members and adults, excuse me, will be provided with fidelity checklists prior to the study, and training will ensure prior implementation. Sorry, training will ensue prior to implementation. So, in other words, the second observer will be trained on how to perform these checklists and other things. For social validity, surveys will be conducted with teachers and parents of targeted students. So basically, this rating scale will be from 1 to 5, 1 being this did not help at all, this was irrelevant, 5 being yes, this completely changed our child's behavior. Outcomes will also be assessed by comparing baseline sessions to same age peers in other studies. So is what we found going to compare the same to what others have found? All statistics that will be conducted during this study will be found using Excel. So getting into some of the results, responding was consistent with the functional relation in all studies. Again, this is hypothetical. This is a perfect world, a perfect study. We'll see here in the first line here, we're looking at the average occurrence during all baseline sessions combined. That showed a stable trend. And you see here the mean was right at 6.64. So that's 6.64 or 6 or 7 times eloped per session. Yeah, that's very high. The range was 5 to 9. The standard deviation was 1.03. And then if you'll move down, we'll look at the same statistics for all intervention sessions across all settings. The average dropped dramatically to 0.66. So basically, we went from an average of almost 7 down to an average of less than 1. That's a significant decrease. We'll look at range was 2 to 0 and a standard deviation of 0.7. So when you look at the baseline data individually across each setting, I'm not going to read these off, but you can see that all the means hovered right there around the 6.7 to 6.5 range. Range was anywhere from 9 to 5 in 8 to 6 in all these, and standard deviations all the way from 1.21 to 0.71, 0.96 in all three settings. Then if we go to the other side and look at the intervention side, we see individual settings showed a decrease in level. So if we go back, we can see here we're still across settings in the 6.7, 6.5. Intervention was implemented, we go all the way down to 0.69, 0.58, 0.75. Again, that's a huge, huge drop off. And it's also important to note that this is also hypothetical. When you can control the data, you can make it look like that. The range, anywhere from 2 to 0. And we'll see over here our standard deviations of 0.7, 0.67, and 0.96. So again, that's a significant decrease. And we can visualize all that in the graphs. We see here our first 4 data points of baseline, number of times eloped. Each baseline session shows a high level. But if you'll notice towards the end of each baseline session, you start to see a little negative trend. This is more than likely due to the fact that we've already implemented intervention in the classroom. Some of that's going to carry over before intervention is introduced at home or in public. But again, you see a functional relation between all settings when intervention is introduced. So if we look back at those previous studies that we mentioned earlier, we definitely can confirm that yes, breaks are a viable intervention. Although we didn't see one that was specifically addressed towards elopement, we did see studies on elopement and the need for that. So we can say with confidence, at least in this student, that breaks are a viable intervention for elopement across multiple settings, not just the classroom. I don't really know how questions would work, but if you guys have any, feel free to post or email me. If that's all, here are the references. Thanks for listening. Hope y'all have a great summer. Dr. King, I know you said you were leaving Tennessee Tech, so I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors and hope to hear from y'all soon. Thank you.